Liquefied natural gas, LNG, has become the quiet disruptor of the global energy order. 10 years ago, it was a marginal commodity. Today, it is the lifeline of Europe's energy security, the cornerstone of Asia's growth, and the latest battleground in geopolitics. In 2023 alone, global LNG trade hit more than 540 billion cubic meters, a record level. But here is the real question. Is LNG the foundation of a more secure and diversified system? Or is it simply replacing one dependency with another? Let's start with the numbers, because numbers reveal the stakes. According to the International Energy Agency, global LNG trade in 2023 was 542 BMCM, up more than 40% over the past decade. The three largest exporters dominate the market: Qatar at 21%, Australia at 20%, and the United States at 19%. The US doubled its share in just 5 years, thanks to shale gas production, transforming itself from a net importer to a global supplier. On the demand side, Asia accounts for 70% of LNG imports. Japan, China, and South Korea are the anchors. But the most dramatic shift has been in Europe. Between 2021 and 2023, European LNG imports surged by 70%, compensating for the collapse of Russian pipeline gas. Prices tell their own story. In mid-2022, spot LNG prices hit a record $60 per million BTU, 10 times higher than the pre-crisis average. These figures highlight a transformation. LNG is no longer a side story in energy, it is the story. To understand this rise, we need to trace LNG's evolution. The concept dates back to the 1960s, when engineers first liquefied natural gas at -162 degrees Celsius for transport. For decades, LNG was technically feasible, but commercially marginal. Pipelines remained dominant because they were cheaper and more predictable. The inflection point came in the 2010s. Qatar expanded its liquefaction capacity on a massive scale. Australia opened new terminals, and the United States, fueled by the shale gas revolution, emerged as a surplus producer ready to export. At the same time, importing countries invested in regasification infrastructure. Terminals sprouted across Europe and Asia, creating the architecture for a global market in natural gas. The strategic advantage became clear: pipelines are locked to geography, but LNG can be shipped to almost any coastal market. In an era of rising geopolitical uncertainty, flexibility was itself a form of power. The Russia-Ukraine war in 2022 was the first true test. When Russian pipeline gas was reduced to a trickle, Europe faced an existential energy crisis. Entire economies risked grinding to a halt. The solution was LNG. Germany, which had no LNG terminals before the war, built floating storage and regasification units in less than 12 months, a timeline previously thought impossible. Italy expanded its facilities. France signed long-term contracts. Cargoes that once sailed to Asia were rerouted to European ports. The cost was immense. Europe paid some of the highest energy prices in history, but the lights stayed on and industry survived. This was LNG's baptism by fire. From that moment, LNG was not simply a commodity. It was a geopolitical instrument, a substitute for pipelines, and the anchor of Europe's survival strategy. Here is the paradox. LNG solved one crisis, but it introduced another. On one hand, LNG enhances flexibility. Cargoes can be redirected. Importers are not hostage to a single supplier. This diversification is why Europe weathered the Russian shock better than many predicted. On the other hand, LNG comes with structural weaknesses. Infrastructure is capital-intensive, often costing billions per terminal. Supply and demand are tightly balanced. When Europe entered the market in 2022, it triggered price spikes that priced poorer countries like Pakistan and Bangladesh out of the market. Flexibility exists, but only for those who can pay. And LNG shifts the geography of vulnerability. Instead of pipeline politics in Eastern Europe, the risks move to maritime chokepoints, the Strait of Hormuz, through which Qatar exports, the Strait of Malacca, vital for Asia, and the Panama Canal, linking U.S. supplies to Asia. Each choke point is a potential point of failure. In short, LNG replaces one form of dependency with another. The architecture of risk changes, but it does not disappear. Looking forward, LNG's trajectory can be examined through three scenarios. Baseline scenario: new capacity in Qatar, the US, and Mozambique comes online over the next 3 to 5 years. Supply expands, prices stabilize, and Europe and Asia manage their competition through long-term contracts. LNG cements itself as the second pillar of global energy trade alongside oil. Stress scenario: key projects face delays, while geopolitical tensions disrupt shipping lanes or exporting regions. A conflict in the Middle East, a closure of the Panama Canal, or sanctions against a major supplier would create immediate price spikes. Import-dependent states, especially in South Asia and Africa, would be forced to ration or retreat from the market. Breakthrough scenario: advances in carbon capture and methane abatement make LNG compatible with stricter climate policies. Investors, once hesitant, pour billions into expansion. LNG secures not only an economic role, but also a political one, as the bridge fuel in the transition to cleaner energy. What unites all three scenarios is the same underlying truth. The bottleneck is not geology. There is enough natural gas in the world. The bottleneck is infrastructure. Whoever builds and controls the next generation of LNG infrastructure will shape the balance of power in energy. And here lies the second blow. In trying to escape dependence on Russian pipelines, Europe and others may be creating a new dependence on LNG supply chains. The 2022 crisis proved one thing: when supply is scarce, the market belongs to the highest bidder. Energy security in an LNG-dominated world is not about access alone. It is about financial strength, geopolitical alliances, and the resilience of maritime logistics. For wealthy importers, LNG may be a lifeline. For weaker economies, it may be a trap. LNG's rise is not just about molecules of gas. It is about the transformation of global trade routes, the redrawing of strategic alliances, and the rewriting of what energy security means in the 21st century. But every solution carries a risk, and every lifeline can become a leash. So the question remains: will LNG create a more secure and diversified system, or will the world discover that it has built a new dependency just as dangerous as the old one? If strategy, history, economics, and finance shape the world, this is where they converge. Subscribe now and join the conversation.